All right, please stand and cover yourselves if you can for the reading of our scriptures today. Whoops, something went wrong here in the last 15 seconds. All right, today we read from Vayikra, which is also known as Leviticus, chapter 7. We start with verse 1. Vezot Torat Ha'asham Kodesh Kadashim Hu Bi Mekom Asher Yishechatu Et Ha'olah Yishechatu Et Ha'asham Ve'et Damo Yizeroch Al HaMizbeach Saviv Ve'et Kol Chelbo Yakeriv Mimenu Et Ha'alya Ve'et Ha'chelev Hamechase Et Ha'kerev Ve'et I lost my place. Ve'et Shitei Ha'keloyot Layot Ve'et Ha'chelev Asher Alehem Asher Al HaKesalim Ve'et HaYoteret Al HaKaved Al HaKelayot Yesirena Ve'hiketir Otam HaKohen HaMizbecha Ishela Yahweh Ashamhu Kol I went too far, hold on. Kol Zachar Ba Kohanim Yochelenu B'makom Kodesh or Kadosh Ye'achel Kadesh Kodesh Kadashim Hu Kachatat Ka'asham Torah Achat Lehem HaKohen Asher Yechaper Bolo Yiyeh Ve'haKohen HaMakeriv Et Olat Ish Or HaOlah Asher Hikriv La Kohen Lo Yiyeh. That word was busted up, very weird. V'chol mincha asher te'afeh ba'tanur v'chol na'asa ba'marcheshet ve'al machovat la'kohen ha'makeriv ota lo tiyeh. V'chol mincha ve'lula b'shemen v'chareva l'chol b'nei Aharon tiyeh ish achiv bezot torat zevach ha'shelamim asher yakeriv la'yaveh. Im al todah yakeriv benu v'hike riv al zevach ha'todah chalot mazot belotot b'shemen urekike mazot meshuchim b'shemen vezolet murebechet chalot belotot b'shemen. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble here. Al chalot lahem chametz yakeriv karbano al zevach todat shelamaiv vehikeriv mimenu echad mikol karban teruma la Yahweh la Kohen hazorek et dam hashelamim lo yiyeh. Uve sar zevach todat shelamaiv beyom karbano ye'achel lo yaniach mimenu ad boker. Ve'im neder o nedava zevach karbano beyom hakerivu et zivcho יאכל וממחרת והנותר ממנו יאכל, והנותר מבשר הזבח ביום השלישי באש ישרף, ואם האכול יאכל מבשר זבח של המים ביום השלישי לא ירזה המקריב אותו, לא יחשב לו פיגול, יהיה והנפש האוכלת ממנו עוונה תישא, והבשר אשר ייגע בכל טמא לא יאכל באש ישרף, והבשר כל טהור יאכל בשר, והנפש אשר תאכל בשר מזבח השלמים אשר ליהווה, וטומאתו עליו, did you hear that? וטומאתו עליו, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה. בנפש כי תיגע בכל טמא בטומאת אדם או בבהמה טמא או בכל שקץ טמא, ואכול מבשר זבח השלמים אשר ליהווה, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה. וידבר יהווה אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, כל חלב שור והסב ועץ לא תאכלו, וחלב נבלה וחלב תרפא יעשה לכל מלאכה, ואכול לא תאכלוהו. היא כל אוכל חלב מן הבהמה אשר יקריב ממנה אישה ליהווה, ונכרתה הנפש האוכלת מעמיה, וכל דם לא תאכלו בכל מושבותיכם לעוף ולבהמה. כל נפש אשר תאכל כל דם, ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעמיה, וידבר יהווה אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, המקריב את זבח שלמים ליהווה, יביא את קרבנו ליהווה מזבח שלמים, ידיו תביאנה את אישי יהווה, את החלב על החזה יביאנו את החזה, להניף אותו תנופה לפני יהווה. והכתיר הכהן את החלב המצבחה, והיה החזה לאחרון ולבניו, ואת שוק הימים תיתנו תרומה לכהן מזבחי שלמיהם. המקריב את דם השלמים ואת החלב מבני אהרון, לא תהיה שוק הימים למנה. כי את חזה התנופה ואת שוק התרומה לקחתי מאת בני ישראל מזבחי שלמיהם, ואתן אותם לאהרון הכהן banai lechak olam me'et b'nei Yisrael. Zot mishchat Aharon umishchat banav me'ishe Yahweh beyom hikriv otam lechahen la Yahweh asher ziva Yahweh לתת להם ביום משחו אותם מאת בני ישראל חוקת עולם לדורותם. זאת התורה לעולה, למנחה ולחטאת ולאשם ולמילואים ולזבח השלמים, אשר זיווה יהוה את משה בהר סיני ביום זבותו את בני ישראל להקריב את קרבניהם ליהוה במדבר Sinai. You may be seated. And stuff. All right. How's my hair? Got the alfalfa thing going? Okay, where were we? Now, to start this thing off, Kyle and Deluche, you may remember that work, said the law of the trespass offering embraces, first of all, the regulations as to the ceremonial connected with the presentation. Now, Onkelos, Vaikra by Drazin and Wagner says, verses 1 through 10 of chapter 7 contain the rules concerning the ashtam, concerning the asham sacrifice. Okay, maybe that'll help. Anywho, they also said, my computer's doing something weird. Whoa, it's going all over the place. They also said, now we did verses 1 through 10 of chapter 7. Now they jump to verses 11 through 18, and verses 28 through 34 says the laws of Shalamim. And then we jump to 19 through 21. They say the requirement of those who handle and eat sacrificial meat to be ritually pure. And 22 through 27, prohibitions about blood and fat, with a closing summary in verses 35 through 38. That is a very good breakdown. All right, so we begin with Vaikra, which is Leviticus chapter 7, verse 1, right? It's in English very literally says, and this instruction, the guilt, holy holies he. Hopefully by now some of you are getting used to this. Starts off with vezot and this. Think about it. That's actually a plural ending. Zeh is your word, but this is vezot. Anyway, it's and this. Like this little thing in my hand. This little thing I'm wearing on my shoulders. This. So what we think of. Torah. You hear Torah, right? Torah. You hear that, but this is in plural. And just to bring it up, because I haven't brought it up in a while, when I used to travel around and teach lessons here and there and everywhere, I used to say to my students, who here wants to answer this trick question? Of course, every hand in the room would go up because they thought that was funny. And then I would say, what is the Hebrew word for law? And then, of course, then every hand would go back up, and I'd pick somebody, and invariably they would say Torah. It's like, I told you it was a trick question. See, Torah is not the word for law. It is the word for instruction. It is the word that we use for maybe doctrine. Maybe doctrine we could use in English. our principles, our values, they're all set on this thing, right? This is the teaching. It's from the root yara, which means to teach, to instruct properly, to teach or conform to something, to instruct concerning something. It's the instruction manual, you know, the thing that guys are supposedly not supposed to read. I know I had a friend, very good mechanic, and we made this deal. I was going to teach him how to play the bass if he taught me how to fix my car. So his very first lesson, we're putting something on the car, and of course came with instructions. And he said, lesson 1, he picks that thing up, shows it to me, throws it over his shoulder. That's not a good idea for me. But anyway, once you know what you're doing, you can do that. But when you don't know what you're doing, you should really read the instructions. Besides this instruction manual, it's very interesting. It has intrigue and battles and sword fights and love. And my wife got that reference. All right, our next word, ha'asham. So let's see, where were we? This is the instruction for the guilt. This is guilt, fault, blame. You know, when you do something wrong and you have acquired guilt because of that, maybe you kick the wife and kiss the dog. Is that how that saying used to go? You know, you got up, bad mood, took it out on everybody around you. Well, you acquire some guilt here. So lots of things that can cause you to be guilty. You go off without your fringe, or say you go off without them, and somewhere along the way they fall off, and you come home. Ooh, you're still guilty. Supposed to have your fringe. And by the way, not every sin that's committed, not every guilt that is acquired requires death. I'm just saying, God's not going to send you to an eternal Christian hell just because your zitzit fell off of your outer garment. Just saying. All right, so we have, this is guilt. It can be guilt of anything. And then the next word is kodesh. So you're guilty of being holy. No. Kodesh is holy. It's what is holy, a holy thing. A thing consecrated to God, especially in silver, consecrated to the temple. Hey, y'all want to consecrate some silver to our synagogue? I guess I should give everybody an update. We're at the point now where we're ready to put the mud on the walls. You know, the sheetrock's up, and we want to tape it off and float it out, make it all pretty. And then we want to put the flooring on the floor. And we bought the flooring already. It was very pricey. We bought some very expensive. It's really pretty, though. You're really going to like it. We got it because the floor guy talked me out of anyway, putting a regular 3/4-inch wood floor in there. He felt like since this would be more of a commercial use for this building, that we should put vinyl down. And this is a vinyl that looks just like wood. It even goes down on the floor like wood. But if we get a flood over there, our floor is still going to be there after the water recedes. So we really like the sound of that. I'd say we, because there was more people involved in that decision than me. So, oh, I just swallowed wrong. You guys continue to pray for me, because I've got this lump in my throat, and we haven't. It's a little too early to look at it. The doctor says it's too small. If they biopsy it now, they might miss it if there's something in it. So they wanted to wait till it was bigger. And then for some reason they went ahead and scheduled, which shouldn't have happened. We need to wait another 3 or 4 months before we do anything on that, because it should be. They're hoping it'll be big enough by then that they'll catch it if there's anything in it. So keep that in mind. And then I've been going through the worst bout of insomnia I've ever had. Well, not ever had, that I've had in the last. It's been 30 years since it's been this way, and I'm still having the trouble. The doc did change. I was taking a medicine that was really helping me with everything. It helped me with sleep. It helped me feel physically better when I got up in the morning. But I started having all that insomnia, so we both thought, well, maybe the medicine's causing it. Well, I've been off of that medicine long enough now that we know it wasn't the medicine. So she put me back on it, and I have actually been getting more sleep. I'm getting, like 3.5 hours, which is really big for right now. So I am feeling better. These started, a couple nights ago, I mean. And so I am physically feeling better when I get up in the morning, and I'm getting a little bit of sleep now, so that's making me feel better too. So keep up the prayers. They seem to be working. I'm just saying, just throwing that out there. Anyway, so this is holy. This is stuff that's set aside for God. For instance, the clothing that I wear on Shabbat, because I'm going to teach and all that kind of stuff, there's laws about what the Cohen are supposed to wear when they are in the temple and all that. Well, that's all I have to go by. So we bought these, what's this stuff called? Linen. We bought these linen clothes, and I only wear them on Shabbat. They're set aside for that purpose, which makes this clothing holy. Anyway, so it's things like that when you're setting it aside for something very specific. You guys, as listeners, are not commanded to do such a thing. It wouldn't be a bad thing to do if you wanted to do something like that. But I do this, and I'm not even commanded to do it technically, but since I'm the closest thing to a Cohen, and this is the closest thing to a temple that this group has, I figure, why not? I know it's not hurting anything. It's certainly not breaking any laws. So it's set aside because it's holy. And then it says, Kadashim. It kind of sounds like the last word, doesn't it? Well, because it is. Only this is holy in plural. This is where they get the idea in English Bibles where they say Holy of Holies. You can say that, and you're not really wrong, but that's not exactly the idea. This just means that it's very holy. This is like bolding your letters and underlining them and putting 3 exclamation points behind it. That's all this really is a grammar thing. All right, and then it says who. So remember, in Hebrew, one of the first things I was ever told is there's no way to say it in Hebrew. Yes, there is. The word is who, which in Hebrew means he, right? He is that guy that lives down the street. But that's also the word that we use in place of it in Hebrew, because Hebrew is a gender-specific language. And so we say the Hebrew word for he to mean it as well. So it is most holy. It is very holy. Or it can be he. But who's the he that would be very holy? And is that he being spoken of here? Probably not. So I'm guessing it's an it. All right, so my translation. And this is the instruction of the guilt offering. It is very holy. The instruction of this offering. So it's the offering that is very holy. So this is a very important instruction, right? All right, so other words, guilt offering, the Asham, Onkelos's Vayikra by Drazin and Wagner. I highly recommend these books. They're really well done. Anyway, it says, and I quote, the use of Asham signifies that the passage concerns the sacrifice and not the transgression. So the focus is supposed to be on the sacrifice in this case and not on whatever it was that you did wrong that has brought you to the place of making this sacrifice. They go on, I think. Yeah, they also said, Saadia adds sacrifice in his Arabic translation. There's several things here that I've always meant to say something about, and I never remember, and I just remembered this time. Sa'adia is the name of a person, yes, but it's also the name of a work, just like Onkelos. There was a guy named Onkelos, and he lived long before the work that's called Onkelos was written, so he did not write the book that was named after him. That did not happen. He lived way too soon for that. But it was named after him because at the time they didn't know any better. So anyway, a lot of times you'll hear me talk about Sa'adia or Onkelos or several of these, especially among the Targums, as if it's a person, and then another time it'll be as if it's a thing. Well, it's kind of both. So I thought I should probably let you guys know about that. Anyway, they said that Sa'adia adds sacrifice in his Arabic translation, at least the Arabic word for it. It is unnecessary in the Hebrew as well as the Aramaic because the Targum used Asham, which signifies the sacrifice, as explained in the commentary above on Asham, which probably isn't here. I'm just quoting him at this point. It is very holy. Now, they also pointed out that verse 6, which explains the law concerning things that are very holy, using air quotes, apply here because the word Asham is used. All they're saying here is that, the Sa'adia added this word for sacrifice, right? Is that what I said? Yeah, sacrifice in front of the word Asham, which makes no sense. It's like saying sacrifice, sacrifice. But it was probably just, the first attempt at writing doctor, give me the news. Anyway, it was funny in my head. So we move on to verse 2, the next one. And Kyle and Deluch, their work on the Tanakh, they call it the Old Testament. I'm not going to give them that. Anyway, in verse 2, it says, the slaughtering and sprinkling of the blood were the same as in the case of the burnt offering from chapter 1, verse 5. And therefore, no doubt, the signification was the same. And I'd have to agree with that. The way it's done is not being changed because it's a sacrifice for something different. The steps to all of that remain the same for many different things. The sacrifice itself stays the same, and the way we do it stays the same. We're just doing it for different reasons quite often. So verse 2, very literally translated into English, would say, in place that he kill they, the burnt offering he kill they, the guilt and blood he spatter upon the altar round about. Now, I know this sounds really weird, especially if you speak Hebrew. You're thinking, I would never translate it that way, and where's he coming up with all those things? But here's why I do this. Beside having a language barrier for most people who are studying this in the West, in America in particular, there's a language barrier, and then there is a distance barrier from here to Jerusalem, and then there is a time barrier from here to 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Then there's, because this stuff's from 3,000 years, well, almost. You got 2, and you get the 1,500. Yeah, so it's around 3,000 years difference. So there's that time difference, and then the dialect from the earlier part of the Tanakh changes over time. It begins because there's influences. They go from Mesopotamia, they wind up eventually at Sinai, they wind up in bondage in Egypt, they wind up in bondage in Persia, and there's an effect that happens on the language itself. And by the time you get to the 1st century, that effect is massive. We've gone from being a idiomatic thought process with a more literal language, though it was filled with idioms, to absolutely idiomatic language filled with virtually no literal thought to basically speaking Spanish with Hebrew words. I'm sorry that modern Hebrew bothers me because it has drifted so far from biblical. And some of it's necessary, because the Bible doesn't give us a lot of words or even roots for those words that we need, particularly when you're talking about medicine and technology and things like that. So certainly things had to be added, but it had an effect on all of the rest of the words that we would use on a normal day-to-day basis. So hopefully that makes some sense. Okay, so we start off with Bimakom, which is in place. That place there, that place there, that place there, that place over there. That help. Asher, it's THAT, that, or maybe WHICH, that which. But no. See, when you're just saying those words, I worry about what people are hearing. Not which as in riding a broom, but which is which. Which door should I go through? That kind of word. Then our next word is Yishehatu. And again, just to point out, yes, I pronounce these words a little bit different because at this time, the language was far more primitive than it is now. So I believe that the way it was spoken differs from the way it is spoken now. And I pronounce everything according to that. Anyway, that would translate he, kill, they. Oh, and the other reason why I do this is you have the language barrier, the distance barrier, and the time barrier, right? But you also have the thought process barrier. The way Moshe thought was very different than the way Hosea thought. And the way Hosea thought was very different than the way the Jews thought at Qumran and Jerusalem in the 2nd century, or in the 1st century, I should say, in the Second Temple period. That's what I'm trying to say. And that varies quite a lot from the way Hebrew-speaking Jews think today. So the thinking process changes. So the point in making the masculine he and making that ending they, if you start thinking of these words that way, you start thinking of them in that manner, eventually, without fully learning the language, it actually trains you how to think in Hebrew, even though you're using English words. I hope that makes some sense, but it really does work. It helps you to recognize idioms and all kinds of things by learning it this way. And this is, in fact, the way you would learn growing up as a child. You do not learn grammar. Your parents do not refuse to give you a cookie when you're 2, or not quite 2, just because you used improper grammar. You didn't form a full sentence, right? We start off with one word, then maybe we add a little bit to that from here and there. And then eventually your parents are constantly correcting your grammar. They're constantly correcting what's called the number, and they're correcting the gender and all of those things as you learn to talk. This approach does exactly that. All right. Hopefully that's helpful to know. Where was I? Yishahatu. He killed is literally what it means. So it's to slay an animal. And why it says especially a victim, I don't know. That's just how they spoke English in the 1800s, I guess. But it's what they mean is, by victim, it's talking about your lamb or your pigeon or whatever. It could be a cow. Whatever it is that you're sacrificing, that's the victim. So we're not talking victimology here. So now it's saying that you're going to, that which was sacrificed. This is et, which has no meaning. That just points to something. And in this case, ha'olah. So it's ha'olah. It's not that word. But hopefully that'll help you remember that that is a burnt offering. So every time someone says olah, they're inviting you to a barbecue. I'm just saying. Anyway, It is the burnt offering, what is laid on the altar, what is offered on the altar, especially a burnt offering, a sacrifice of which the whole was burned. And that makes it sound like they took some cow and tossed it on there and burned it all up so that God could have food. No. Oh, Lordy, Lordy, no. That maybe the pagans did, but that is not what the Yehudim, the Jews, did not do that. The food was for the people. The people. There were parts that the people were not allowed to eat. And that was, it sounds like in English that that's the part that they're giving to God. No, that's the part that they're getting rid of. They cut it up. Part of it goes to the Kohen who's officiating the sacrifice, as you well know. And the rest of it goes to the people who brought the sacrifice. Because if you're bringing a cow, probably it's because you have a big family to feed, right? Because in those days, in the Bible days, people traveled as a village. Why? Because a village usually was a single family. It was, everybody was related. And so when they went from their little farms out in the middle of nowhere into the city to celebrate the Passover or whatever it was they were celebrating, the whole family would come, and they oftentimes brought all their animals because they probably didn't have that many. They'd have enough for the sacrifices, and then maybe if it's a long trip, they bring an extra goat or whatever so that they'll have something to eat on the way there and an extra one on the way back. You know, if they, and that would have been wealthy people. The rest of them would have been eating green eggs and ham or something. I don't really know. All right. So our next word is yishachatu. It's the same word. You're going to slay that victim. And then it says et, which is pointing to ha'asham. So here's your guilt. That thing that you're guilty of. This is ve'et damo, and the blood of it. Its blood is how we would say it, but it is in the end of this word if you're speaking Hebrew, so that's why I like people to learn blood, he. Eventually you start thinking of he as it. You will. So, but it's blood, and it's called that because of the color. So dam is more about the color of, what is that, crimson? It's more about that color than it is about anything else, but it's called damo because of its color. All right, then we have yizerok, he spatter. And the best way I know to say this is like if you think of taking a paintbrush and you dip it in some paint or some water, any kind of liquid, and then sling it, there'll be a spatter pattern, right? That's what they're talking about. Spatter, and then the word all in Hebrew, which is not A-L-L. It's not everything. All in Hebrew is how you say on or upon. Al shulchan, on the table, right? Al eretz, on the land. This just means on top of something. Then it says hamitz be'ach. So in this case, it's on the altar. Mitz be'ach, on the altar. Saviv, round about. So you just kind of spatter it all over the place, right? So here's a translation. In the place that they slay the burnt offering, he will slay the guilt offering, and its blood will spatter on the altar all around it. So you get it, right? There's not one place where you sacrifice for the burnt offering and then another place where you sacrifice for the guilt offering. There's one place where you sacrifice, and that's all they're saying here. So moving on to 3 and 5, Kyle and Deluch said of verses 3 through 5, the fat portions only were to be burned upon the altar, vis-a-vis, that was her favorite thing to say, the same as in the sin and peace offering. And then, of course, they're saying, see chapter 4, verse 8, and chapter 3, verse 9. But the flesh was to be eaten by the priests, as in the sin offering from chapter 6, verse 22. Inasmuch, they say, as there was the same law in this respect for both the sin offering and trespass offering, right? Then they go on to say, and these parts of the sacrificial service must therefore have had the same meaning, every trespass being a sin. And again, they're saying, see chapter 6, 26. They go on, certain analogous, and that's as close as I'm ever going to get, so I'm going to leave it at that, instructions respecting the burnt offering and meat offering are appended in verses 8 through 10 by way of supplement, as they ought properly to have been given in chapter 6 in the laws relating to the sacrifice in question. So I should point out here, in case you may have gotten confused by that, it says, I said that the priest eats some and the people eat some, and here they're saying the priest eats the sacrifice. Depends on the sacrifice. Some of the sacrifices the priests get part of, and some apparently the priests get all of. Doesn't sound to me like the people get all of it at any point. Unless maybe that's for poor people. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of one where the people get it all. And why would you do that? Why would you make somebody work that hard for a sacrifice and then not give them something to eat? That just don't make sense. All right, verse 3. Literally it says, and all fat he bring from us, the tail and the fat, the hidden, the midst. There are going to be people that'll argue with me about the us part, but I'm going to stand firm on my belief on that. The word ve'et, and it's just a pointer. Et doesn't mean anything, actually. It points to something. And kol, all helbo. Sounds like elbow, but it's helbo. All the fat of it. The fat, the fatness, metaphorically, the best or most excellent of any kind. The fat of the land. In other words, the best of its fruit. The fat of the heart, i.e. torpid, unfeeling. Leave that last one out. That's the negative. It doesn't fit here. You do realize that in Hebrew, one word can have a lot of meanings, right? And they almost always have a negative. And that was the negative, which is not applied here, is what I should have said. Anyway, so it's, you know what fat is. You got all this fat, you pull it out, and then sometimes you trim the fat off the end of the steak piece and all that. You know what I'm talking about. Well, most women do. I don't know about you guys, but if you barbecue in your backyard, you really should know this by now. Then our next word is yakerev, Hebrew, because it's masculine, Hebrew. It's to approach, to come near, used of men, and poetically of things, especially of time. God is said to draw near when he aids the afflicted. Those are said to draw near to God who worship him. It's to draw near, to be in someone's presence, that kind of thing. And you know that's not the only word that does that, right? Because if I say paneh, I'm saying essentially the same thing. So there's more than one word that can be used here, but this is the word they use. All right, so then it says mimanu. I have from us. It's from the word mean, which is a part taken from the whole. So if you have a pie and you chop it all up and you take a little slice out of there, that is a part taken from the whole. So it comes from something, right? In this case, it's from us. This is et, which points at something. Ha'alya, from the tail. The tail. That's the thick and fat tail of a sheep. These sheep were a little bit different in this area. They had very curly hair. I guess you could say that was hair. Would you call that fur? I don't really know. It's more like hair, to tell you the truth. We have some in our home. It's what color would you call that? Just brown? Yeah. It's brown and it's real curly. And this is from one of that type of sheep. And these are the ones that like to climb on things and jump up in trees and odd things like that. and they have very fat tails. So it's talking about that very specific kind. But the area that they were in was just full of that kind. Probably still is. So then we go on to ve'et hachelev. That's the fat, the fatness, metaphorically the most excellent of any kind. We've already had that, right? Then it says ha-mechaseh, the hidden. This is which is covered, which is hidden away and concealed. So this is, if you recall from earlier times, this brought on a lot of argument between the people who lived, hundreds, if not thousands of years after the fact, becoming very literal about everything, and then they wind up in a big argument about this stuff and what it is. So it says et ha-kerev, that's hidden in the midst, it's hidden in the interior. So it's the fat that's inside the body, and you can't see it until it's cut open. It's really kind of all there is to that. So our translation, and all of its fat he will bring from us, the tail and the hidden fat in the middle. Sometimes these verses don't do well standing on their own, do they? Because it should have been a continuation. Verse 4 should have been part of verse 3, and they help to make more sense that way. All right. Verse 4, very literal English. I'm sorry, but my tongue is literally sticking to the top of my mouth. All right, it says, and, you have the pointer, two, TWO, that's the ordinal number 2, the kidneys and the fat that upon them, that upon the flanks and overhang upon the liver, upon the kidneys, he makes remove now. So you see that was all part of that previous verse, and it makes more sense now, right? Because it's, and the fat he will bring from it, the tail and the hidden fat in the middle, and 2 kidneys and fat on them and the flanks, and all that stuff that's up in there that's hidden away. So hopefully it helps make it make a little more sense. So it says ve'et, so it's and pointing at something. Ve'et shitei, the number 2, ha-kelayot, and the 2 kidneys. It's that simple. And then it says ve'et ha-chelev, and the fat asher, that alehem, that is on them. And the fat that is on them. The kidneys and the fat that is on them. Asher al, that is upon ha-kesalim, and that which is on the flanks. You know what the flanks are, right? If you get on a horse or a cow and you kick backwards at where its legs join to its body, it's called the flanks, and they'll start bucking. Not really the best you could ever have. And that's how they get them to buck in a rodeo. They put the strap around their flanks, and they're very unhappy about that, so they feel that they should throw it off and anything else that may be sitting on their back. That's all I'm saying. Ve'et ha-yoteret, and the overhang, the leftover, that which is redundant, the extra. Yeah, let's put it that way. This is all ha-kaved, and on the liver. It says the liver is the heaviest of the viscera, both in weight and in importance. Then it says all ha-kelayot, and on the kidneys. It says it twice. Must be important. Yesi rena, he makes remove now. This is all going to happen at this point in time. To turn aside, to go away, to depart, to remove. If you depart from some place, that means you're removing yourself from that place. That's why they have that connection to that. But it's removed like we think of in English. So my translation then is, and the fat that is on the 2 kidneys, that are on the flanks, and the leftover on the liver, and on the kidneys, he will remove now. Because there's, I don't know, I don't have images to show you, and I'm certainly not going to cut open an animal to show you. But there's a spot, we've gone over it before, where there's that extra fat that it's redundant, if you will, like they said. They're saying take all of that stuff out. Of the words fat that is on the two kidneys, Onkelos by Drazen Wagner wrote, and I quote, in other words, they are the fat and the diaphragm of the kidneys that were introduced in the verse. Is that clear as mud? All right. Let's move on to 5. I think this might be as far as we can go today. We're kind of running out of time. So it says in literal English, and make smoke with them, the priests, and make burnt offerings to Yahweh. I'm covering my head so I can say God's name. Guilty. Oh, Yahweh is guilty? Vehi ketir, and make smoke, to give a scent, to be fragrant, to offer odors. Some people can offer odors. Anyway, that guy I've been working with this week, he offered a lot of odors. Burn incense. Our next word is otam. You know what? Nobody in my current audience is laughing at my very funny jokes. Still nobody. Otam, that just means with them. HaKohen, the priest. This is Hamiz Becha. Remember, I said Hamiz Becha. I did not say Hamiz Be'ach. Do you hear it? It's a different word. And you've had this word before. And make, burn you. Make it burn, to give a scent, a fragrant, to offer odors, to burn incense. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Isheh, or not sheh, ish. It's fire. They're calling it a burnt offering here, so-called from the fire by which is burned. But this is actually just the word for fire. But they say it comprehends all kinds of sacrifice, and even once used of sacrifices that were not burned. So they're using the word fire to describe a sacrifice that wasn't associated with fire. It's odd, but it's a Jew thing. Then it says, La Yahweh, to our God. Asham. Oh, so here's our word for guilt offering. Fault, guilt, blame, the thing, something that you did that made you guilty. And then our last word is who, so it's either it or he. And the Kohen will cook them. Remember what we just pulled out, the kidneys and the liver and all that stuff. And the Kohen will cook them. Now, it literally says the Kohen will make smoke. To make smoke is to cook. It's an idiom. And the Kohen will cook them. And you will make the burnt offering burn to Yahweh. Whoops, I forgot. For his guilt. I should probably wear a kippah on Saturdays. It's better than putting the thing on and off my head every day. Yeah, let's see. Oh, well, this one's real short. Yeah, let's pack number 6 in there if we can. Literally in English, it says, all male with priests, he eat them in place. Holy he ate. Holy, holy is he. So we start off with kol zahar, which is not zikaraj, because this is a sound-alike word. I'll help myself out. It's the word for males. So all males, ba kohanim, that's with the priests, yohelenu. So it's achal. It's the word for eat. He will eat it with the priest. They, what's plural? They will eat it with the priests. All the males. Then it says, Bemakom, in that place. What place? Well, Kadosh. I thought it was going to say Holy of Holies. It didn't. In that place, Kadosh, in that holy place. Yachel, he will eat. Yeah. In a holy place, he will eat it. It is Kodesh Kadashim. It is holy holies. It's not the holy of holies. They're not going to go back behind the holy of holies and put their meal on the ark and sit there and eat. Ain't going to happen. No, it just means that it's very, very holy. And it says who, which is he. All males will eat with the Kohanim. They will eat it with the holy, in the holy place. That which they eat is very holy. It is holy holies. It is Kodesh Kadashim. Very holy. All right, we have definitely run out of time. I couldn't possibly sink the next one in, so we will stop here. And I will see you guys next week. Same time, same channel. Shalom v'shalom. And don't forget to click on the like thing and the subscribe to the channel. I never remembered to say